Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are going to be looking at the best question that was asked in the latest earnings call from Palantir's Q2 earnings. This was from Bank of America analyst Mariana. It is very funny because the past 2 quarters her camera kept failing and she wasn't really able to ask her question. So finally she got her tech set up and she asked a really interesting question. Now, the reason I want to highlight and talk a little bit about this question is because she focused on the qualitative analysis we got from the shareholder letter versus the deck, which is that there's 100 organizations using AIP and there's more than 300 additional enterprises that are in the talks to be able to get onto AIP. I thought this was one of the most encouraging things from the earnings call because that means there's 400 customers in the pipeline. Palantir has not monetized any of these customers to the best of my knowledge in the context of AIP, which means you could imagine even 400 paying $2 million a year. That's $800 million more in ARR. And some of those bigger clients are going to pay a lot more than $2 million. So the trajectory of growth seems to be set up for them to monetize AIP rapidly. They have 5,000 users in enterprises using it. That's growing 50% month over month. And they launched it 10 weeks ago, 2.5 months ago. Their latest generative AI platform launched in a sea of competitors claiming they have the best Gen AI products. And Palantir has 400 customers potentially for it in the pipeline. So I thought this question was a really good question. And one of the unique insights as we're watching this is Karp's explanation of why AIP is the future for Palantir and what they're going to do with AIP that they were able to do with Foundry and the sort of similarities in terms of how enterprises are going to adopt that product. So let's take a listen to this and we'll keep going from there.
And then you'll receive a prompt to unmute your line.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Very nice to see
So my
you.
question is going to be about AIP. You mentioned more than 100 organizations using it right now. How are you thinking about ratio and timing of conversion? And second, on the other conversations we're having with like 300 plus organizations, how many of those are willing to use it on a Foundry platform versus their own?
You want to take this?
Sure. So
By the way, it's a pleasure to see you.
Finally.
Karp saying that, and she's acknowledging that because her tech hasn't worked for so long. So again, her question is, how many of those clients are willing to use AIP with Foundry as well? So you can kind of sell them both. And how many of them, what is the sort of likelihood you see of the trajectory of these companies really adopting the potential of AIP? And I think Sham and Karp both give a really good answer here.
we're in the phase right now where we're very focused on driving compounding usage of this. It's like, you know, we've done this with Gotham, we've done this with Gaia, with Foundry, with Apollo, and what we're excited to see is that we have over 5,000 monthly users. The users are growing 50% month over month. Obviously, we've been doing this for 10 weeks now. That's quite a bit in the enterprise for the pace that we're going at here. I think, you know, let's look and see what happens in the next few months here, but we don't think it's going to be too long to kind of turn that corner. Can you remind me the second part of your question?
People don't have Foundry. How does that work?
Oh, I think the real focus on the AIP product strategy is to make sure that you can use AIP without Gotham, Foundry, or Apollo.
Now, this is really important because if you don't have Foundry, which is Palantir's flagship product, that actually makes it easier to have AIP because Foundry is just an ontology of your data and AIP is a semantic layer on top of all of that understanding of your data. So like it makes it really easy if you have Foundry because then you just plug in AIP, you have a structured view of your data. AIP is the LLM, the infrastructure that allows the LLM to understand parts of your data, and it's seamless. It's a very symbiotic relationship. If you don't have it, one of the questions may be from clients, well, still, can I use it? And Sham here talks about why it's still beneficial to use AIP even if you don't have Foundry.
And that to the extent you see the value in these things, you're going to pull them along with you. Now, I think that's where ontology has been most useful in both contexts. Of, you know, we've deployed operational workflows on classified networks using this technology in real-world exercises. That's only accomplishable because they're standing on a decade of this well-ontologized data and the kind of enterprise tools that they have for warfighting to accomplish those use cases. So when you look at the time to value, it helps them solve for their use case. The other part that I would point out is people then see the value of bringing their own tools to bear. When I think about the work we're doing with pharma companies and many of the AI models that they've already built, this actually helps them close that last mile where they feel like, look, we have these exquisite models, we have these libraries. How do we actually connect it to the business case of driving drug development more quickly?
Now, this is really important because basically saying, look, in the example of pharma companies that have created their own models to be able to use artificial intelligence to accentuate drug discovery, which is the goal of a pharmaceutical company. They don't need Foundry. They can just use AIP to be able to enhance the models they've already created to get to the business value, the time to value that Sham was talking about, a lot more quicker. So basically he's saying, look, you don't really need Foundry, but if you did have Foundry, it helps, but that's not a prerequisite in order to be able to sell into the enterprise.
And then you see these sort of hybrid architectures emerging where you have AIP, you have Foundry, you have their homegrown systems working quite harmoniously against the ambitious problem. And so I think that's been pretty productive. And I think the good part about this, because it's so generative right now, is that there is no reference architecture. You're not getting caught up in kind of academic questions of how should we design this thing. People are forging that and figuring that out relative to what works and delivers value.
Let me just riff on
Now, this is where Karp is going to say something really good off the last point that Sham just said.
that a little bit. We built this original product. Our first product got us off the ground, made us famous in a very small market called clandestine services. And that product PG, did something really interesting. It de facto taught the world what the use case is that you would need to solve, and then provided the product that solved it. And that's exactly what we're doing with AIP. It's like, you do have an advantage if you already have Foundry, because we've already kind of pre-taught you where the road is going to go. But right now, to Sham's point and point I made earlier, there is no roadmap. The product is actually teaching people what the roadmap would look like. That doesn't mean everyone will buy AIP, by the way. A lot of people say, okay, well, I need these 15 things. I need what Sham is calling ontologies, the ability to interact with the LLM. I need an ability to take that out and turn it into logic. I need an ability to run that on my enterprise safely. I need all these things. And I want to spend, some people are going to say, hey, I want to spend $500 million building that because I want to own it. A lot of those people will fail. Some will succeed. Lots of the other people will buy it from Palantir. But we are de facto teaching people the quote-unquote roadmap of the way the world will look and the problems you'll have to solve. And it teaches them because you can show it live in action. And that's what's going on in the market. And that gets to, when will we actually monetize this? We will monetize. Palantir is guilty of many things. People thought we were insane. Some people think I'm eclectic. Some analysts think that I am talking something they've never heard of, right? Often right. We have no problem monetizing. We make $2.9 million per commercial customer across the world. We will figure out how to monetize it. First, we're teaching the market what it is. We're getting people on board. We're showing people that these are the kind of problems you'll have to solve if you want to engage in actually making money, as opposed to writing neat poetry that may be scary to your enterprise and your board won't let you install anyway. And then we will allow people, then we will charge for that.
This was the best answer that I heard during these earnings call, and I think I had to listen to it like 3 or 4 times to really get an understanding of like why that answer was so good. So what is Karp saying here? The question is, can you use AIP without Foundry? Sham goes and basically says, yes, you can. Now Karp follows up and says, look, because Sham said there's no reference architecture, meaning like, and this is what Dan Ives also said in the report, right? That all these CIOs are like, there's no reference point. It's just Palantir if we want to implement AI platforms. Karp is kind of really solidifying and validating that argument. Essentially by saying there is no roadmap for how generative AI and LLMs are going to be used into enterprises. Just like 10, 15 years ago, there was no roadmap for how an ontologized view of your data that was a structured representation of how your organization was going to be able to derive business intelligence from your data existed. It didn't exist. There was no roadmap. There was no roadmap for clandestine services. There was no roadmap for how you take massive amounts of data on the battlefield and then use that to be able to create some type of system, i.e. Gotham, to be able to make decisions in mission critical situations. There was no roadmap for any of those things. And the unique thing about Palantir that I believe differentiates itself massively from other software companies is that they are teaching customers about the problem. And as a result of teaching them about the problem, they are giving the solution to the problem. And when you know you have a problem and you realize how big of a problem it is, and then you get a solution to solve that problem and you don't have to pay anything for it, i.e. you're not monetized, you just get to use the solution and see if the solution is valuable. If you think that solution is valuable, you're going to really care about the company and you're going to really care about the product. And then Palantir is going to have a lot of pricing power over the product. So the idea that Karp says that we are showing the market how to use this product, we are explaining to the market, given all the difficulties they have in terms of becoming an AI first, a data-driven decision-making company first, a platform and what it actually looks like for them to not be able to do it versus what it looks like for them to be able to have these business insights, and then showing them the solution to their problems via AIP. That to me it's a really genius plan, and it makes a lot more sense for why Karp said a few months ago that we have no pricing strategy. Like, how do you put a price on that? It's priceless. As Karp said, you will monetize it later once you have the stickiness of the software, of the platform, of the buy-in by the customer because they are educated on the problem and solution that they have to work with and their enterprise. And then it's a question of, are they going to go with someone else? As Karp said, sometimes people will try to build it themselves and they're going to have to spend $500 million building it themselves, and they will probably fail because it's not easy to do this. This is why we saw Databricks acquire a company doing kind of the same thing Palantir is doing in terms of building AI infrastructure for these LLM training models for $1.3 billion. It's not an easy thing to do. Even if you have $1 billion in cash, it's not an easy thing to build it on yourself. And so if you need to be educated to know that you need a product like Palantir, especially when you're seeing the problem in the workspace, and that problem is pretty easily defined. If your competitor is using large language models to become more faster, effective, efficient, etc., and you're not, if you're a content creator and someone else is creating more content, better content because they're using AI and you're not, you need to be educated on why they're able to do that, what speed and agility they have in terms of addressing the problem, and how you can ultimately adopt a solution for yourself that works for your business. It makes a lot of sense to me what Palantir is doing, and this is why the revenue growth I am not scared about. And you know, I could be wrong 5 years from now if it doesn't work out, but the 13% revenue growth to me is strategic in the fact of they can't monetize AIP. Like, as a shareholder, you have to understand trying to suck a dollar out of these 400 clients that are using AIP is stupid. You want them to be onboarded. You want them to be educated about the solution. You want them to see the problems they're going to have in their organization if they don't have this particular type of solution, and you want them to be embedded with it. You want as many employees as possible within each enterprise that's onboarded onto the platform to use it every single day, see the value, understand why it's so relevant, and then after 12 months, they're like, it's $6 million. Can you afford that? Okay, $6 million. We got a deal. Boom, $6 million top line revenue. Let's get the next client, and let's just keep going and compounding from there. So I think the answer Karp gave here was a philosophical answer in terms of how Palantir has adopted and built Foundry and Ontology and all these types of things, and how they got product market fit originally, and how he's applying that philosophy to what AIP is going to look like, but also from a technical perspective, why it's so difficult to be able to monetize right now, or for a company to be able to build it on their own without having the strategy they're going with. And that strategy is as follows: give the value, let them understand the value, let them use it, soak up all the value, ask for some money. And more likely than not, you're going to be able to close a lot of deals because we see all the clients Palantir has. They've been able to close a lot of deals because they're able to derive the value. And if you derive the value to the customer is going to end up paying for the product. So to me, this is really exciting. 400 customers is nothing. Imagine if they have 2,000, 3,000 in the next couple of years using AIP or trying to use AIP. There's a lot of potential for AI to be to be one of those premier products. And that's on top of the fact that we don't even know what other new products are coming in the future or what might be added on to AIP that will be helpful to organizations and other governmental contracts as well. So this is exciting. I think this was the best response that Karp has given to a question, and it was a really good kind of tag team by Sham and Karp explaining what the roadmap is for AIP, or the lack of roadmap that exists, and how their product is creating the roadmap in order to get customers onboarded onto the product. So I liked it a lot. Let me know what you thought about this specific answer by Karp and Sham to Mariana's question. And yeah, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Dan Ives event, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday, tomorrow. If you're watching this on August 10th, August 11th, if you got to the end, comment cowbell. And that's how I know you got to the very, very end. I did this yesterday with Plastic Cup, and so many people commented Plastic Cup. I was like, oh my God, so many people stayed to the end. So if you got to the end, comment cowbell. It'll always be an inanimate object now that I see in my room. I'm going to be like, comment cowbell. But yeah, we'll be having Dan Ives Friday, 5 p.m. on Twitter. Links in the description. It'll be a fun conversation. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the next one.